In October 1347, a fleet of Genoese trading ships drifted into harbor. Locals who greeted them found the crew dead or dying at the oars, their bodies covered in black, oozing swellings. The disease entered Europe here, at the port of Messina, Sicily, but this harbor was just the terminus of a much longer journey. To understand their vulnerability, we must look at the continent waiting for these ships. Mid-14th century Europe was packed to its limits. Populations had surged, straining agricultural output, and the vast majority of people were locked into a rigid feudal hierarchy, tied to land they did not own. The actual origin point for this outbreak lay over 1,000 miles to the east, at the Black Sea trading post of Kaffa. In 1346, the walled city was under siege by the Mongol Golden Horde. As a highly contagious illness decimated the Mongol ranks, their commanders made a calculated tactical decision. They loaded the infected corpses of their own soldiers into catapults and launched them over the city walls to break the defenders' resistance. The biological weapon they unleashed was Yersinia pestis, an aggressive, flea-borne bacterium. Fleeing the biological fallout of the siege, Italian merchants boarded galleys bound for home. The thriving, interconnected Silk Road and Mediterranean trade networks now acted as a high-speed distribution system for a microscopic killer. Victims developed severe fevers, internal bleeding, and swollen lymph nodes. The onset was so rapid that people who went to sleep entirely healthy could be dead within 3 days, leaving no time for medical intervention or last rites. From Mediterranean ports, the infection swept inland. Over 4 years, the contagion pushed north and west, consuming cities and farms alike. Data reveals a terrifying demographic collapse. Western Europe's population was effectively halved, with some regions seeing 60% mortality. The panic is visible in the archaeological record. Excavations beneath modern cities reveal circular mass graves, where bodies were stacked in rapid succession. The sheer volume of casualties broke the basic functions of daily life. City governments dissolved, markets shut down, and churches stopped processing the dead. By 1351, the worst of the first wave had passed. Whole estates sat abandoned, with crops rotting unharvested in the fields. This chart shows a bizarre economic anomaly. While millions perished, physical capital like land and mills remained intact. The survivors' per capita share doubled. Suddenly, there were more farms than farmers, giving the peasantry high leverage to demand higher wages and legal freedom. The severe shortage of men also forced a shift in gender roles. Women stepped into the economic vacancies, taking on trades, managing estates, and participating in commerce in ways strictly prohibited a decade earlier. The rigid hierarchy of feudalism broke under the weight of market forces. In its place, a new, highly mobile middle class began to emerge. The survivors inherited a wealthy world, but also a deeply traumatized one. The old rules of predictability and divine protection had completely failed them. This collective shock materialized in European art. The 14th century saw the rise of the macabre style, exemplified by the Triumph of Death fresco. Notice how the skeletal figures interact with the living. The imagery makes a very specific point. Death is the ultimate equalizer. It strikes down high-born kings and low-born peasants with equal indifference. This visual democracy of death mirrored a deep spiritual crisis. The church had been unable to stop the dying, and huge numbers of the clergy had perished alongside their flocks. The resulting vacuum shattered the institution's absolute monopoly on truth and authority. Stripped of old certainties, people began looking for new explanations. This psychological fracture cleared the intellectual ground for the Renaissance, shifting society toward humanism, valuing scientific observation and rational inquiry. Because prayer and penance failed to halt the disease, municipal governments realized they had to rely on physical, administrative logistics to protect their survival against future outbreaks. The commercial hub of Venice, highly exposed due to its vast maritime network, took the lead in building a systematic defense against contagion. Venetian authorities mandated that incoming ships anchor offshore for 40 days, a period they called a quarantena. They established designated islands, like Lazaretto Nuovo, to isolate the suspected sick and physically scrub cargo before it reached the mainland. These were desperate, militarized reactions to a biological threat, but they established the institutional foundation for global pandemic management and public health that we still use today. Back on the mainland, the enduring lack of labor forced a restructuring of agriculture. Many regions abandoned labor-intensive grain farming in favor of raising livestock, a shift from corn to horn that required far fewer workers. This map highlights how certain coastal and mountainous areas, like Portugal and Cornwall, developed an excess of young, mobile workers. No longer needed for farming, this surplus labor was funneled toward the sea, creating dedicated crew regions. Europe now possessed a unique combination of resources: concentrated survivor wealth to fund expensive voyages, and a generation of risk-hardened sailors willing to staff them. To maximize the power of these smaller crews, engineers developed advanced sailing ships and mounted them with labor-saving weaponry like cannons. The mass mortality of the 14th century was an agonizing trauma, but by breaking the stagnant structures of the medieval era, it concentrated wealth, forced technological adaptation, and launched the social mobility that ultimately built the modern world.